been a while since I've been able to update. Let me start off by saying I've spent a lot of time in the field without creepy things happening, so don't think a Marine's life is filled with creepiness. Just recently I was out there for a few weeks and nothing remotely spooky even happened. Anyway, we last left off in the middle of February with update number 4. It's April now. Spring. The desert is slowly transitioning from a cold, windy purgatory to a scorching sandbox. Luckily for us, we hit the jackpot of deployment and headed off to Australia to do some training for 6 months instead of baking in the desert. Now, I know what you're thinking. Australia sounds great. I thought that too until we landed in a place called Darwin and stepped off the plane. Instantly, I felt like we were inside of a sauna. It was extremely humid and we were sweating through our thick uniforms within the first steps onto the tarmac. It was hell. Flies and mosquitoes everywhere. They would crawl into your mouth and up your nose if you let them. It seemed like they weren't the only ones with a death wish in this tropical prison. For the first month, we did our little dog and pony show to impress the Australian Army. We worked out twice a day and told them all how cool we were. The food they fed us was always some kind of stew made from yesterday's leftovers. That got old really quick. Being Americans, we quickly found the nearest fast food restaurant and supplier of 2 liters so that we could stock up on calories before the field. We really didn't know what to expect on our first field up. All we knew was that we would be heading into thick brush hundreds of kilometers from civilization and expect to be killed by 20 different animals by the first night, if we were lucky. That's not an exaggeration by any means. There's a plant called the Gympie Gympie, aka the suicide plant, because the pain from its sting is so intense and long-lasting that most people and animals just kill themselves. Also, there's a virus in the dirt known as the Vietnam time bomb. Stuff will kill you from the inside out. Our first few days out there were pretty exhausting. We did a ton of patrolling at night, or, as I like to call it, walking blindly into spiderwebs. We would try to sleep during the day, but if you slept more than an hour, you'd wake up dazed and dehydrated from the sun. I think it was around day 12, towards the end of the field up, when things started to get interesting. We were completely fucking lost, as usual, and wandering around in one long file during the night. There was no moon, and all you could hear were the various birds and other animals repeating the same noises over and over. It was all a blur until the guy in front of me stopped and picked something up. I didn't really pay any mind until we had halted for a break and he turned around to me. "Hey, check it out, I found a doll." "What? A fucking doll?" He held it up and sure enough, it was a doll. The body was completely carved out of wood and it had some fake red hair glued on. Its eyes were just burn marks and it had a creepy little smirk scratched across its face. Weird. Keep in mind, we are quite literally in the middle of nowhere. Most of these lands were still completely unexplored. As I'm sipping water and trying to rack my brain for answers as to why the fuck there's a random doll in the middle of nowhere, we start moving again. I completely forget about the creepy doll for the next hours, while we mindlessly walked around to try and find our objective. It was all a blur as I fell asleep a few times whilst walking, so I don't remember much. Eventually, we found our way and arrived at the objective, a small clearing in the middle of nowhere. It was the early morning now, and we were supposed to sit there all day and wait for more orders. We were all pretty damn tired at this point, so I sat down and stared off into the distance and drifted off to sleep. Suddenly, I hear a few grunts to my left, and sure enough, the machine gunners are playing with the doll they found. They're a simple-minded breed and easy to maintain, but they always find a way to screw everyone else over. I remember the distinct thought of, yeah, that's probably not a good idea. I fell back asleep and spent the day napping and planning for our next objective. Finally, the sun set and we headed off into the distance to our next objective. I remember being kind of excited that we only had one more thing to do and we would be back to base. As the night went on, a long file of Marines began to get more and more spread out. The brush became thicker. Absolutely zero ambient light. I was struggling to keep up with the guy ahead of me. People kept getting lost and we were constantly stopping to find them. We were just trying to get out of the jungle by this point. I was already creeped out by the extreme darkness, but when our compass, radios, and GPS equipment started going crazy, I began to lose some composure. No matter how much we spun our compasses or reset our GPSs, it would always slowly turn us back to the way we came. Our radios turned on, but all we could hear was just some kind of white noise. Nothing. I knew right away that it had something to do with that doll. Maybe it was some weird voodoo aboriginal witchcraft doll. Who knows? Bad vibes. I told the guy who picked her up to gently set her down somewhere nice and keep walking. Nothing. Everything still went haywire. Our leaders decided to take a break to see if they could figure out how to navigate using the stars. Being in the southern hemisphere, the constellations and such are a lot different. Whilst I'm doing my best to keep cool and a level head, I heard the guy in front of me start frantically screaming, like pure fucking terror. A few of the guys walk up to him and calm him down, and he spits out a stream of expletives followed by doll. Shit. The doll somehow made its way back into his pack. We're too spread out for this to be practically joking. It was just too impossible. We both walked past it when we set it down. No one is laughing. He grabs the doll and puts it down. He starts talking to it and apologizing like it was a real human person. I remember making a mental note of how absurd that was. By now, our fearless leaders seem to have figured out where to go, so we start moving. I didn't want to stop because I knew that doll was probably still with us. But we're talking about lieutenants. We're bound to get lost. Eventually, we stop, and all of us are holding our breath whilst the guy checks his pack. Nothing. We sit down and relax. The air gets a little lighter and easier to breathe. There's a bunch of commotion coming from a few guys back. One of the lieutenants found the doll in their bag. He's completely lost his mind at this point, laughing and crying at the same time. Day 12 of the field up and all the heat, bugs and creepy crap just broke his mind. We put the doll against some logs a few meters away from us and everyone paused to assess the situation. We're lost in the middle of nowhere. We have no idea where we're going and we don't have much water. Awesome. I can imagine the smirk on the doll's face whilst we all collectively lose our minds. At least the sun is starting to come up. For the next 30 minutes we try to confirm our last known location and get the general idea of where we are. The doll isn't done with us just yet. Suddenly we start to smell smoke. Off in the distant tree line we see a blazing fire and we pick up. Someone grabs the ineffective lieutenant and we head away from the fire into the opposite direction. Sure enough, it's coming from that way too. We keep trying to find a way out until we realize we're walking in circles. There's fire everywhere. In the face of imminent death, sit down and take cool pictures and hope someone finds them in the aftermath. I was never really a believer in any kind of higher being, and I still don't. I guess we just got extremely lucky. We heard a helicopter flying overhead, and I'm assuming they realized we were lost after we hadn't checked in for a super long time. The pilot made an amazing landing between some trees and began ferrying us out of the clearing a few hundred feet away. We made a conscious effort to leave that damn doll behind in the flames. However, my troubles were not all behind me. Guess what we found when we got back?